Well, Elon Musk is now the richest person on the planet.
More than half the satellites in space are owned and controlled by one man.
Starting his own artificial intelligence company.
Well, he's a legitimate super genius. I mean, legitimate.
He says he's always voted for Democrats, but this year it will be different. He'll vote Republican.
There is a reason the U.S. government is so reliant on him.
Elon Musk is a scam artist, and he's done nothing.
Anything he does is fascinating to people.
Welcome to Elon Inc., where we talk about Elon Musk's vast corporate empire, his latest gambits and antics, and try to make sense of it all. I'm your host, Max Chafkin, in for David Papadopoulos. Today, we're talking about Tesla. The company's fourth quarter sales numbers came out earlier this morning, and Elon Musk's car company reported that it had delivered nearly 485,000 vehicles between October and December. That's basically what Wall Street expected. Meanwhile, something that did not meet expectations, Fidelity once again said that X, Elon Musk's social media company, was worthless. Not worthless, but worth less than it was when Elon bought it. X lost nearly 11% of its value in November, which sounds bad until you realize that was the same month he told Bob Iger, the CEO of one of the world's most beloved companies, to go fuck himself. To discuss this and to look at what's ahead in the new year, we've got our panel here. Sarah Fryer, who leads our big tech team here at Bloomberg News. Hello, Sarah. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
And Dana Hull, the world's most diligent Tesla reporter. Happy New Year to you, Dana.
2024, LFG.
Okay, so Elon Musk has, over the last few years, I think, Dana, correct me if I'm wrong, bragged that he spent the new year delivering cars, that he's been, in the factory, trying to put the last bow on another year for Tesla. Do we have any sense of whether that's what he did over this holiday?
So it's not like I'm on the phone with Elon, but my sense is that he spent part of the holidays in Puerto Rico, or at least his jet was in Puerto Rico. And yeah, I did not get the sense that he was in Fremont or in Austin, like helping out the delivery guys, which, he has done in years past. But yeah, no, I mean, I think he was out of town.
What do you make of the numbers? So 485,000 vehicles for the last 3 months of 2023, 1.8 million cars for the year. I mean, it sounds like a lot. I mean, in historic terms. On the other hand, not as high as some other companies.
Yeah, so the big news out of the numbers for me was they didn't break out how many Cybertrucks they delivered, which is pretty funny given that this is their brand new vehicle. So they delivered, 484,507 vehicles. They broke out the 3 and the Y, and then they had other models, which includes the S, the X, and the Cybertruck. So we have no idea how many Cybertrucks have actually been handed over to customers. And it just is weird that they didn't break that out. So,
well, it has to be intentional, right?
Right. It's a lousy number. So they didn't broadcast it. If it was a positive number, they would have absolutely said, oh, we did 1,000 or something like that. So they're basically obfuscating how many Cybertrucks they've actually made. And then the big thing is that they've lost their EV crown to BYD, which is the Warren Buffett-backed Chinese company that also makes EVs. And, Musk has said over and over again that their biggest competition is in China, but this is the first quarter that we've actually seen BYD kind of come ahead now in terms of full EV deliveries ahead of Tesla. But the stock reaction today is kind of mixed. I think it's like the delivery numbers were in line with what Wall Street was expecting, but nothing earth-shattering.
So, Sarah, I mean, you sort of hinted at this. On December 29th, Musk wrote, I stand by my prediction that if Tesla executes extremely well over the next 5 years, that the long-term value could exceed Apple and Aramco combined. Is that the spin that we're going to see? Like, this is just, strength on strength. He's just going to play this as a huge victory?
I mean, I think that the game of talking about these things is to surprise and delight, right? So you want to start with this grand vision. And I think that's the thing that Musk always excels at. He makes people believe that the future is going to be way crazier and unimaginably amazing compared to today. And then, the details are kind of they should probably exceed expectations. But in the case of Tesla, they haven't always, except for, when it comes to the actual uptake of EVs, I think for Tesla have a little bit of a better chance because the charging network for everyone else is kind of crumbling. So, that's one way you might bet on them. But I think when it comes to talking about the numbers, the best case scenario is to just say the future is going to be so much better than you can even imagine and not focus on what's right now.
And I guess that's what he's saying. Dana, you brought up BYD. Refresh our memories. Like, what is BYD? And to what extent is it fair to compare them to Tesla? How similar or different are they from Tesla?
I mean, it's a Chinese electric car company and a battery company. And I think that like what most people are realizing is that when you look at the EV market, there's kind of two clear leaders, BYD and Tesla, which are vertically integrated companies that make the cars, basically make the batteries, know a lot about like powertrain and engineering and battery cell development. And then there's like everybody else, which is the legacy OEMs that are trying to pivot to EVs, but don't have that kind of in-house expertise. And so like one of the big narratives in 2023 was like slowing EV growth, that like the EV market is still growing, but it's like slower than usual. And you saw like Ford and GM and all these other players kind of like pull back on their expectations. But like BYD and Tesla are totally leading the world in volume. And Tesla deliveries year over year, it was 38% growth. I mean, that's still like significant growth. I mean, Tesla's growth is not like the runaway 50% growth that they have had some years, but it's still growing. And yeah, I mean, I think BYD does not really sell cars in the United States. So that's why like a lot of people are like, what the hell is BYD? Because you don't see like a BYD car on the freeway, but they are a massive player.
Yeah, and China's a massive market that, of course, Tesla has wanted to participate in. I mean, does this bode ill, at least for Tesla's sort of like big hope for growth in China?
I think it's going to be very interesting to see in the coming year how Tesla reacts to BYD in China. They've done a lot to kind of cut prices in China. They do a lot of marketing in China. Tesla owes a lot to China. I mean, the Chinese government really supported the building of that factory in Shanghai. And after the United States, China is far and away Tesla's largest market. So I think just like keeping an eye on price cuts and the ways that Tesla tries to pull demand levers in China is going to be really interesting.
Sarah, do you think that Elon Musk's sort of ceding the crown, the electric vehicle crown, to another company is significant? I mean, how much of his mythology is kind of baked into like being the market leader? Or do you think this, ultimately becomes no big deal?
I think if I'm Elon Musk, I'm taking credit for it, right? It's like a victory because he started the EV revolution of the modern era. And so other companies succeeding in it, it's like a reflection of his own influence on the market, or at least that's how I'd see it if I were being optimistic. But I think that, in the past, we've heard him say, like, take credit for the whole EV revolution, which is why we've talked about how he felt so snubbed when Biden didn't so much as mention Tesla when he talked about the proliferation of EVs in the U.S.
Dana, you talked about the Cybertruck briefly. I read your article on Bloomberg.com about sort of different guesses as to how many Cybertrucks were sold. I think the analyst estimates range from anywhere from, several hundred to several thousand. We know that there was at least one Cybertruck out there because there was a crash reported over the weekend involving a Toyota Corolla. Did not end super well for the Corolla, although there are no injuries. I mean, just from sort of social media and scatter reports from Tesla dealerships, do we have any sense of how many Cybertrucks are on the road or how this whole process is going that we've been talking about for the last few months?
I think Elon tweeted over the weekend that there are a couple hundred out there now, and a lot of them are so a couple of hundred on the roads, I guess, in the hands of customers. There are Cybertrucks in showrooms. It's a big marketing thing for Tesla. They want people to come to the showroom to see the Cybertruck and then hopefully like sit in a Model Y and then buy a Model Y. I mean, I saw one in real life. I was walking to Trader Joe's and like one drove by and I was like, oh, there's a Cybertruck. So
An actual moving one.
They largely seem to be like on the road in Texas and in California. I think that's where the first deliveries are probably going to. But, they've warned that it's going to be a very slow ramp. I just think the fact that they didn't break out how many they delivered in today's quarterly sales report is just really telling. Like, it's not a lot. The crash that you mentioned was kind of classic in that, like, we don't really, most journalists don't write about car crashes unless it's a Tesla. And that's been like a beef that Tesla has had for quite some time. Like, God, like there are thousands of car crashes across the country every day. And like none of them make headlines unless it's a Tesla. In this case, I think the Corolla like crossed the median and like ran into the Cybertruck. And there's no evidence that the Cybertruck caused this crash.
And crucially, I think, the Corolla driver was okay, which obviously there are people warning and probably validly warning about the size of this thing and the potential danger it could pose to sedans. Although in this case, it seems like luckily everybody was okay. I mean, for me, the big thing with the Cybertruck is that this, it's this kind of boundary breaking vehicle. It's totally different. It's totally sci-fi. And because of the way it's rolling out, there's a bit of a letdown here. And we see it in these numbers. We see it over the last few weeks where Elon Musk did this amazing thing. He introduced this like Back to the Future car. And it's kind of like, not a whole lot of excitement, partly because they haven't managed to get these on the road.
All the ones I've seen in San Francisco have been prototypes that actual employees are testing or driving.
Yeah, they say RC on the side, release candidate.
Does that make you the coolest person in San Francisco or the least cool person in San Francisco, Sarah?
That I've seen them? I think I'm just surrounded by
RC
futurists.
On the side of here. All right, so last thing I want to do before we move on is Dan, I just get a sense from you over what this means for Tesla going forward. So we're going to see an earnings report at the end of the month. What are you thinking about there? What are you thinking about kind of looking ahead for Elon Musk's car company?
Yeah, so the big question I think on everybody's mind is what guidance does Tesla give for 2024 in terms of how many vehicles are they going to deliver? They set a target of 1.8 million for 2023. They met that target. But what is it for 2024? Is it like barely any growth? Is it going to be like 2 million? Is it going to be 2.5? Is it going to be 3? I mean, Elon is always about growth, and they don't really they have like a pretty stale lineup right now, and the Cybertruck is not out in high volume. So how are they going to grow given that like their bestseller, the Model Y, is 4 years old? I mean, I'm sure that they'll like refresh it. They'll probably enter some new markets, but they don't have anything fancy and snazzy. And the Cybertruck is going to be very slow going. So just the whole question of their guidance is the big one for investors. And then how do these price cuts that they've had all year impact the margins? And in 2023, Elon Musk made this very shrewd decision that they were going to chase volume over margins to kind of protect their market share. And that gambit basically worked. I mean, they cut prices, they moved metal, but how low are they willing to go? I mean, are they going to continue to cut prices, or have we reached kind of like a steady state? And then do they start advertising? Like, what are they going to do to actually get new people into these cars? People who are not like your generic, like sort of early adopter, tech savvy, environmental climate change caring person. Like the wave of people who wanted to buy an EV basically already have. And now it's this like real effort to kind of convince middle America to consider an EV. And that's something that Tesla hasn't really had to do before.
Well, we know they're going to advertise on X.
Yeah.
Which really needs it, right?
Yeah. I wonder how much they'll spend, what the spend will be.
All right, well, let's talk about X then, because, on the last day of 2023, Axios reported that Fidelity, as I said at the top of the show, the big asset manager, cut its valuation of the company, making it 71.5% less valuable than it was at the time that Elon Musk purchased it for $44 billion. I think that implies a valuation of about just over $12 billion. This disclosure includes a nearly 11% drop in November. Sarah, I found myself kind of inured to this kind of report just because it's like, oh yeah, this platform that's been gasping for air for months, that Elon Musk has been, insulting, advertisers. It's almost like, yeah, no crap. It's lost a lot of money. What does this report mean?
I think that there is some real significance here because we don't have any insight right now into how X is valuing itself, how they are telling bankers they're doing, and investors, what kind of information those people are getting. And so the Fidelity numbers, although, it's not perfect, we don't know how many shares they hold, we don't know what kind of information they get from X. It is at least like a rare public disclosure of something about this company.
Yeah, and I guess it's also a counterpoint. Unfortunately for me, I listened to the Cathie Wood, Elon Musk Twitter Spaces. Cathie Wood, an investor in X, and sort of spent most of the time talking her book, and was sort of heaping praise on Elon Musk's campaign to take on the woke mind virus as she sees it. And so, of course, this is a counterpoint, and maybe a douse of cold water or something on the kind of universe of boosters who've been kind of promoting this thing.
I think it's also just interesting because it really kind of punctuates this myth of Elon as being this financial genius, right? Like, he has done all these incredible things. SpaceX is the most valuable private company in the US. Tesla is like the 8th or 9th largest company in the world. He really shrewdly raised capital at a time when interest rates were low. And then X is the big time that he really mistimed the market. He overpaid. He spent $44 billion on this thing right before the market started to crater. And he has not been able to turn it around. And for him to sort of be the owner of a company that is now worth far less than what he paid for it, and then he's got all this debt that he has to service.
And also, I think what's important here is this number is not about Elon. I mean, a lot of the other rhetoric about X, the other decisions we've seen people make, have been about his behavior directly. Advertisers pulling money. Elon Musk calls them haters, says, go F yourself. He really feels like every time somebody takes money away from X, that's, a personal slight against him and the company and the future, the, consciousness of humanity or what have you. This is about Fidelity telling its investors, here's what we have and what it's worth, based on our best guesses, based on all the numbers we have, all, whether it's a third-party valuation or, market comps or what have you. This is Fidelity, not making it about Elon, just kind of giving an update to their portfolio.
Do we have any sense actually what goes into this sort of valuation, or what they're even going on?
I mean, that's the hard part. It's all behind the scenes. We know that X has given its largest holders some information about the progress of the business. Bloomberg reported that the company's ad sales were projected to slump this year to about $2.5 billion. That is a dramatic slump from last year. So there's some real, money at play here. I should note that this change in valuation happened almost right after the Musk comments to advertisers at the Deal Book conference. This is a November 30th update. So it could have even, they're going to have to reevaluate it.
And does this have any impact on the debt payments that Elon Musk, the efforts to renegotiate debt, what, Sarah, looking ahead, where is X financially? And does Elon Musk have any hope of sort of quickly turning things around?
Well, quickly is going to be tough, but all of the banks have the debt on hand on their balance sheets. Obviously, it's been uncomfortable for them. They can't sell it. They've tried. And they have this agreement amongst themselves that if they sell it, everyone gets to sell it at the same price. So it's not like, Morgan Stanley can just sell it at 20 cents on the dollar and get rid of it. If they sell it at that amount, everyone is allowed to sell whatever portion they have. That's so they don't end up undercutting each other on offloading this debt eventually. So a few things could happen. I mean, there could be restructuring of X if it gets really bad. They could go into some, as Musk has hinted at. I don't think that they will, because if that happens, then all the equity would just become zero. And I don't think that Musk would want to do that to all his close friends and investors that put money into this company. And he's actually said, I don't plan to start losing money for people now. So I think he's going to try to find a way to turn it around. My best guess is that he's going to use the Grok AI as a launch point for trying to make X about more than just a social network and ride the AI hype wave. That's one way that could happen. But then, everyone has a chatbot now. So how special is that? I guess we'll see.
All right, before we get to any, fully fledged predictions, I want to ask one more question to Dana, which is, We've been talking, I feel like for over a year, really, over the sort of behavior on X potentially spilling over to Tesla. We got these new numbers, basically meeting expectations. Why hasn't what's happening on X seemed to have an impact on Tesla? And are we getting to the point where we can conclude maybe it won't? Like maybe the attributes of the car, exist on their own?
Well, I mean, you and I have kind of wrote a story about this last year, right? Like, there's definitely anecdotal evidence that there's like a never Tesla crowd. There are consumers out in the world who will never buy a Tesla because they think that what Elon Musk has done to Twitter/X is like abhorrent, and like they're just never going to buy a Tesla. But fundamentally, people buy cars because of the price and the range and the quality of the technology. And like Tesla is still kind of the main game in town, at least here in the United States. I think the other thing is that how Elon behaves, it's much more of like a US centric thing that people pay attention to than it is globally. Like I'm not aware of like how closely the average consumer in China tracks what Elon Musk is saying on Twitter at 2:00 in the morning. And so the brand has always been very closely intertwined with Elon. But what you're seeing on X, and Sarah alluded to this earlier, is like a lot more Tesla executives are now using X to kind of promote the company. Like more executives are tweeting. Every facet of Tesla now has its own handle, like the Cybertruck and the recruiting team and the factories, and like Optimus, the robot, has its own Twitter account. And so you're seeing the company do a lot more kind of marketing on X. And to Sarah's point, they're going to start advertising, or they already have, or like that's going to be a really interesting thing to watch in 2024.
All right. So we'll keep an eye on that. But now I want to turn to predictions. It's the beginning of the year. I think we should go around. Each of us should make a prediction. Sarah, let's start with you. Predictions for 2024.
So I think that we are going to see X have much less influence on the 2024 elections than everyone thinks they will. I think by then the political conversation will have moved maybe elsewhere, or if it is another Trump versus Biden election, I think that there's just going to be a lot of widespread apathy about that pairing and people who dislike both candidates, and there just won't be nearly the level of discussion line that we saw in the prior election. So maybe this is my fingers crossed, but
you're just wish casting here, I think.
Well, I also think that we're seeing a decrease in relevance of the platform itself.
When Donald Trump names Grok his likely candidate for Secretary of Defense, then you will have to eat your words.
I will.
Dana, what about you? What do we have? Sarah gave us what I think is a pretty positive prediction. It's something to look forward to for 2024. What do you have? What are you sort of hoping for or expecting in the new year?
So I guess my prediction is that I think Elon Musk is going to increasingly cast himself as like an aggrieved victim of government overreach. And we've already seen this play out with he has tangled with regulatory agencies his entire career. NHTSA is the fund police. The SEC is the short seller enrichment commission. The FTC and the FCC, he's no fan of them. And as his empire grows, various government agencies are going to try to, rein him in with varying degrees and pretty limited success. But I think that going into an election cycle, you're just going to see Elon increasingly take the tack that he is a victim of big government overreach, and that all of these regulatory agencies, and Biden in particular, are out to get him, and that these mean government people are trying to, ruin him and don't appreciate all that he's done for job growth in the United States.
My prediction is sort of related to Sarah's, but it's maybe a little less serious. I predict that Elon Musk and Giorgia Meloni, the leader of Italy, will intensify their alliance, however that means. And I do think we should be on Elon Musk romance watch here. I hope I'm not overstepping the bounds of the good sense of this podcast, but Elon Musk spent part of December there. He spent a lot of time talking about the need to make more Italians. And I do think there's some breadcrumbs here if we're willing to follow them.
I think the podcast might want to consider like a trip to Italy to kind of do some on the ground reporting here. I mean, it seems like this is, New Year's, new beginnings.
Coliseum episode.
A lot of people take stock of their relationships when the new year begins.
I agree. We need an offsite, and I will bring that up with David Papadopoulos the next time he's here. Okay, let's leave it there. Thanks for listening to Elon Inc., and thanks to our panel, Sarah Fryer and Dana Hull.
Always a pleasure.
Anytime.
This episode was produced by Stacey Wong. Naomi Shavin and Rehan Harmansi are our senior editors. The idea for this very show also came from Rehan. Blake Maples handles engineering, and we get special editing assistance from the one and only Jeffrey Grocott. Our supervising producer is Magnus Hendrickson. Thanks a bunch to Business Week editor Joel Weber. The Elon Inc. theme is written and performed by Taka Yasuzawa and Alex Seguiera. Sage Bauman is the head of Bloomberg Podcasts and our executive producer. I'm Max Chafkin. If you have a minute, rate and review our show. It'll help other listeners find us, and we will appreciate it. Happy New Year to you, and see you next week.